Here are my most improved teams since week one. We're going to start with Texas A&M. They had a really rough start hosting Notre Dame at home. And really ever since they've been a little up and down, but they've really started to hit their gear. That was a huge win over LSU. And now they're favored going into South Carolina this weekend. They're 6-1. They have looked really good since week one. Now let's head over to Oregon. Man, who had a rougher start than Oregon? I mean, obviously they have no losses in the L column, but they really struggled with the entire state of Idaho. The Idaho Vandals and Boise State caused them a lot of trouble the first few weeks of the season. Now they're beating Ohio State and they're taking care of business in the rest of their games. They've looked great since the beginning of the season. How about Florida? Florida has 3 losses. All of them are to top 10 teams. It's to Miami, it's to Texas A&M, and it's to Tennessee. And they started off really poorly against Miami, and that started to think that everyone was going to go downhill and the season was going to be kind of rough. But they took Tennessee to overtime. They didn't have the greatest game against A&M, but they've been kind of hitting their stride a little bit. And Lagway has been looking good, and they've been getting explosive plays, and they've looked much better since that Miami game at the beginning of the season. What about Virginia Tech? This might be one of the bigger turnarounds. They lost to Vandy and Rutgers at the beginning of the year, and then they went on to play Miami to the wire in a very controversial call that went Miami's way, but Virginia Tech was on the losing end of that. But they have been looking great ever since the beginning of the season there. And what about Colorado? Another great one here. They struggled with North Dakota State to open up the season. They kind of got blown out by Nebraska. And kind of after week 2, myself, I was like, okay, here we go again with Colorado. Just going to be a kind of disappointing team through the year. But the complete opposite. They have completely flipped it around. They've been looking great. They're a Big 12 title contender right now. So kudos to Colorado for getting that done. How about Notre Dame? An embarrassing loss to NIU. And after that happened, everyone was like, okay, Marcus Freeman, what are we doing here? This is we've seen this before from you. I'm not sure if we're going to continue to buy into this. And now they've been looking really good. They have the win over Louisville, which was great. They just stomped Navy, and they're going to continue to roll through their schedule. So they've made some really great progress since that NIU game. How about Mini? Mini is a team that I think people are sleeping on right now. They had kind of a rough opener against UNC because UNC's god-awful. But I think Minnesota was still trying to find their identity. Max Brosmer really wasn't himself that he is now. He has really progressed through the rest of the year. And then they had a really tough game against Iowa, but now they're laying a field goal to Illinois, a ranked Illinois team, whose only 2 losses are to Oregon and Penn State, 2 of the top 3 teams in the country. So Mini has really come around as well. And then lastly, Clemson. Clemson played Georgia in week 1 of the season and pretty much got their doors blown off of them in the second half for sure. Wasn't even a close competitive game. But since then, they have been rolling through teams. None of the rest of their games have been remotely competitive. They have just been absolutely dominating right out of the gate, and the other teams don't even have a chance. Obviously, those other teams aren't the level of Georgia, but their offense has looked different since it did against Georgia. Cade looks much more confident. It looks like Garrett Riley and Dabo are trusting Cade a little bit more. So I think Clemson is on the up and up, and they're now favorites to win the ACC. After week 1, everyone was like, okay, here's what, Dabo's not using the transfer portal. It's rearing its ugly head now. The narrative has kind of shifted a little bit. Clemson has been looking really good. So I look forward to these teams in the rest of the year. I think a lot of them can end up playing spoiler in the likes of Florida, who have a lot on their resume left, and Virginia Tech and Minnesota. So let's keep an eye out for that. Follow Big Body Ball CFB on all socials.